Hello, and welcome to today's webinar focused on two of our newest compliance products, sexual misconduct prevention for faculty and staff, as well as sexual misconduct prevention for students. My name is Jennifer Scherze. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at Kognito, and today I'm joined by our presenters, Kim Wieland. She's the product lead for the higher education vertical here at Kognito, as well as Ann Todd. She's a Title IX consultant, and she was also a subject matter expert who collaborated on the creation of each of these products. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kim. She is going to lead the introductions and we'll tell her a little bit about her role here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be talking about these programs here today. I lead our product on the higher ed side, so I have the exciting job of getting to work with our institutions across the country, our subject matter experts, and our amazing internal experts to create and bring these programs to life. So excited to talk about them today, and excited that Ann, who was one of our subject matter experts on this program, was able to be here to talk with us as well today.
Thanks, Kim. I'm thrilled to be here and was excited to work on this project. I have a legal background, primarily in employment law and civil rights. I've been doing Title IX consulting for about 7 years now. Prior to that, I was working in higher education. So I do a lot of Title IX and campus police audits, policy work, and training for investigators. But the majority of the work that I do with client schools is serving as an external investigator for Title IX cases. So, I really live and breathe Title IX and Clery, but so much of the work that I do is kind of after the worst thing has happened. And so I'm usually coming in after a report is made, and I appreciated working on this project because this allows me to help spearhead and think through what can we do on the front end and the impact that will have, particularly on my work as an investigator. So thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. I'll just briefly cover who we are at Kognito, and then we really want to jump into why this program, as Ann said, really thinking about what we can do proactively and upstream, and then talk about how we did that, both creating the scenarios and also how Kognito creates programs. And then we'll talk a little bit about the actual program that we're now launching to go with our student program. So we're just launching our faculty and staff sexual misconduct prevention program. Always, we want to show you a demo of what those practice scenarios look like. We want to leave plenty of time for questions. So as we're going along, please do submit questions. We'll make sure that we leave time for that at the end. And then we have some exciting next steps as well for those who are participating. So just briefly about Kognito. We have really been doing this for a while. Many of you might have known us as we started around mental health and suicide prevention, but our goal has always been, what are the things that we can do to really improve the behaviors, the life skills, the conversations that are happening on campuses, in districts, in all of the different places that we work across both higher ed and PK-12 to really create these safer and more inclusive campus communities. So over the years, we've been adding more and more programs really based around this idea of what are the different conversations, what are the skills that can be practiced, and really bringing our expertise in gamification and simulation and adult learning science to all of the topics that our partners are working on and those evidence-based strategies. What can we do to move the dial? What I do want to then just talk a little bit, and thank you for jumping in, Jennifer, because this screen is important and we're going to go through the demo, which is how do we combine all of these evidence-based strategies? So some of these communication techniques, what does it mean to be an active listener, and use some of those, as well as the idea of trauma-informed, and what are the reporting requirements, and how do we do that in an actual gamified simulated practice scenario? So what we do is we enable each of the learners to be able to choose their own dialogue options. So this is so that they can pick something that feels like what they would say. So the way we come across these options is that we actually do interviews. We do interviews with faculty and staff. We interview our SMEs and we do role plays and we have them talk through typical conversations. We also interview students and we have them talk through how they have experienced conversations. And then our writers bring those together and begin to look at all of those different options so that as you're going through these dialogue options, it feels very natural, very realistic to the types of conversations that are already happening and the types of things that people are saying. We do coaching feedback as we go along, and we do that in a positive manner. So we're really trying to nudge somebody. It's not, you did that wrong. It is more, if try this to see if that helps that person open up more. Or, that they felt a little judged in that moment, try this to see if that makes them feel more supported. So we're really using that positive feedback. We do know that adult learners feel much more comfortable receiving that type of feedback from an avatar, somebody who is not a peer to them, and they're actually more likely to improve, and they're also more likely to feel more comfortable by doing it in this setting. So we'll show you what that looks like in the demo, but at the end of it, they receive a personalized performance summary. It's really not scored. It's more about, here are some of the skills you tried, here are some of the things that went really well, and here's some skills you can continue to try with your students and your peers. Everything we do is really focused around behavior change. Knowledge is important. You use that knowledge to improve what you're doing in those. So you need to know what those communication skills are. You need to know what your requirements are. You need to know what types of things you should be looking out for. And then you're going to use that and actually use it in a practice scenario. So for us, we do efficacy surveys. We look at the results from all of our surveys on all of our programs. This one specifically is really focused on what did that look like as far as faculty and staff improving their preparedness and self-efficacy to recognize, approach, and discuss referrals for their students. And as you can see, there's huge jumps in increase in that self-efficacy. Self-efficacy leads to behavior change, which is why it's such a key area for us to look at. And the same thing with students. In our student programs, we know that students are much more likely to use all of the skills that we are taught, but really one of the key ones is that they're much more likely to seek help and self-refer if they do need support. So just a little bit about our what and the programs that we have. So we do already have a sexual misconduct prevention program for students. This came out about a year and a half ago and is being used already by quite a few universities. We did cover certain skills that are key for both prevention as well as really that trauma-informed conversation with a survivor. So we covered bystander skills. There's a whole practice scenario where students are able to actually use bystander skills, making them much more confident to know how to safely intervene in the moment. We covered consent, which for many students is a new concept that they're sometimes learning as they are entering your campuses. So we were able to cover that in a way that is very high level, but also gets them to think through, what does that actually look like? What does that sound like? What does that look like? And then again, helping a survivor really, the same skill sets that we're teaching in faculty and staff, but now peer-to-peer. Our new program is again Title IX and Clery Act compliant. We do have that disclosure practice, and we're going to look at that in our demo. We also have a workplace bystander skills practice scenario, which is another thing that we'll cover. It was really important for us to make sure that we also had an NCAA version. So we'll talk a little bit about more of the versions. For those of you who are on the compliance side, we do also have a program around protecting our youth that does cover child abuse and neglect. It also covers human trafficking and prevention. And that also has 2 disclosure practice scenarios, but with a younger age set. So what are some of the things that we covered in those practice scenarios? We really wanted to make sure that how do you respond effectively to a student's report of sexual misconduct and really avoiding that secondary trauma. We want to make sure that everyone knows how to refer students, and as Ann said, make that referral feel supportive and positive and give them agency in what that looks like. And then what does it mean to identify and be able to prevent some harassment and discrimination by using peer-to-peer bystander skills? So what does this look like as far as the overall program? It's actually split out into 3 separate modules that can all be done at the same time or can be implemented separately. The first one is Title IX. That is the longest. It does have quite a bit of content that it legally needs to cover. And then we also have the scenario around handling a student disclosure. And we always have check for understanding questions. We want to make sure that they've really retained some of that knowledge and are able to apply that knowledge. So as they leave this program, we've had those checks as well. We're very excited about Module 2. Module 2 is really around this idea of what does it mean to maintain professional and healthy relationships. I don't know that the title does its service, but really what it is it's around what are those proactive things that faculty and staff can do to model and to really make sure that in the conversations that they're having, in how they set up their classrooms and how they set up their other environments, what does it mean to, what does consent in everyday life look like outside of a sexual relationship? What does giving agency look like? What are some of those other really healthy types of things that we can do in our relationships and that they can do in their environments and that they can model for their students? And then the last,
I was going to say, Kim, what I loved about this module, I have an HR background, and oftentimes we kind of know the check boxes of things that we need to talk about. But what I liked about it, because of the research that Kognito is pulling together, that it was really what are we looking for in that professional and healthy relationships in the workplace? So it wasn't really from the HR people telling, but more members of communities talking about what they're looking for. And I think it ended up with some nice material in there.
I love how you put that in, and we have an internal saying that we live by, and that is nothing for us without us. And so as we put our research together, we're always asking, what does it mean to really build out these cultures that everybody is talking about? What does that actually look like? And so this was our chance to really add some more of that and add some more proactive pieces that people can do. One of the pieces for our workplace bystander conversation that's in the harassment and discrimination piece, which is the last one, is really those types of peer-to-peer conversations. And I'm really excited to talk about that. It does follow that same, where you're going to have some of the pieces that you need to legally cover around harassment and discrimination, but then how do you actually use those conversation skills to disrupt some of that and begin to change the culture farther upstream? And then again, we always want to make sure that we're providing that feedback and doing that check for understanding. So we're going to spend some time just digging deeper into these practice scenarios and some of the nuance of them. This is really the area that sets this apart and gives that ability to build that self-efficacy around some of these conversations. When we did this one, there were some very specific reasons why we chose the scenario as it was. We do have it set as either a coach or a professor, so depending on which version you take. But Jules is going to come expressing some concerns around being around an individual. And so There's not a full disclosure in this one, and there was some reasons that we chose to do that. So Ann, I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about this practice scenario and why this was chosen as a pretty typical type of conversation that happens.
Yeah, what I appreciated about Kognito training is that it really goes beyond compliance, right? So I was just attending a compliance training, big room, couple hundred people who are mandatory reporters. And so there's lots of topics to cover in a short period of time. And one of them was, you're a mandated reporter. If a student discloses to you, this is what you need to tell. And someone raised their hand and they said, well, what does that conversation look like? And the presenter is like, I don't have time to go through that with you, right? And I in that moment, I thought of this training. I thought, this is what prepares you for that, right? As Kim said, it's a fairly simple scenario in a lot of ways. You don't have a lot of information going in, and I think one of the things that we as humans, our instinct is to fix it, right? A student needs something and you want to just say, okay, no problem, I'll fix that. But the reality is there's a bigger issue here, and listening for those cues and what Jules says is what we're listening for to figure out what else is going on here. And Jules may need something more than the little fix that we can all easily do. And so I think that this scenario, it is kind of common in some ways. And you can imagine this in so many different scenarios, both from athletics, clubs, classrooms. And the other thing I'll say too about the scenario is we're also not just getting this in a vacuum. So we've had this other learning that has come with it, and is kind of embedded throughout it.
And as you mentioned, Anne, there's some typical pitfalls that people tend to sort of fall back to, right? I want to fix it, or I want to dig for more details because I don't feel like I have enough information. And what I love is as you guys were modeling really effective ways to have these conversations, you kept saying, and you'll see this in the demo, you don't need to get all of the details. And it's okay to let them know they don't have to keep sharing, but you can connect them to people, and give them that option. And so there's definitely a level of when we replayed this again with faculty and staff that they felt, oh, this just feels so much better. This feels right. I had so much anxiety about this conversation, but now I feel like I can really support them and that there are people on campus to support me. So that was really powerful to see that feedback from faculty and staff as well.
Yeah, the scenario is really modeling two things simultaneously. It's showing how to show support, the word choice, judgment-free, that we really want to start from a place of making sure they're safe. But then, I said earlier, I don't like compliance training. It's also compliant because it builds into that conversation also that we have to talk about reporting requirements, the options for both on and off campus resources, which is a Clery Act requirement, letting the students know that we have this obligation potentially to report depending on which one we're using. So I think I also appreciated that learning that was sort of built into the practice scenario as well.
So in our final module around harassment and discrimination, we were able to do a peer-to-peer conversation that is around harmful language. Now, we specifically chose not to do something that rose to the level of going direct to HR. So we chose something that the intent of it was not harmful. The impact of it, on the other hand, could begin to build sort of that environment that does not feel safe for everyone. And so what I love about this, in our Cultivating Inclusive Communities program, we did what I would consider sort of that idea that I can be a leader in that moment, where something happens on campus to a student, their intent did not match the impact of what they said, so the impact was much more harmful than their intent. And instead of getting stuck in that spinning wheel of intent, we were able to model how you can use these communication skills to begin to move the conversation to a place about impact and do it in a really positive way. Many times people don't want to have these conversations because they feel uncomfortable. This is a peer of mine, it's not my place. And so I think this makes it much more accessible, and it feels much more like something we can all do. And I think one of the biggest reasons is because we model a communication technique called ask, tell, ask. Many times we all tend to fall into, here's what you did, here's why I didn't like it, and then sharing our opinions. Whereas ask, tell, ask enables the conversation to kind of go back and forth and talk about, are you okay if I sharing something as far as, hey, this is how that made me feel, even though the comment wasn't towards me, and then asking their thoughts on that. And that's a really functional way to begin to talk about these types of things and begin to move the dial in those conversations. And I know you spend a lot of time helping us think through the scenario and how to model these types of conversations. And because you come from that background where you know what HR is thinking in these moments, you really had a good understanding of how to get this conversation right.
Yeah, the reality is when someone misbehaves and rises to that level, as you said, Kim, that's actually an easier conversation, right? This one is hard. It was a hard scenario in a lot of ways, because this for an HR person, it's those behaviors that haven't gotten to that level that we want to go ahead and address, because if we don't address, we may have something happen. And so again, the takeaways of practicing that, how do I coach somebody who's my equal, and somebody I want to maintain a relationship with, but still make a difference in the workplace. And again, I had my husband came home with a similar scenario of trying to figure out how to coach a student on something. The student was doing behaviors that made someone feel disrespected, and he was like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, I have a scenario that will help us practice this. So I do think that there's really kind of no better way to practice this type of conversation except in this sort of setting where no one's watching. We're able to kind of do it over and over again, try it in a different way, see how that felt, because I think we can do this and come out of it in a better way of having all kinds of different conversations, not just in the workplace, but in other aspects of our lives as well. I love constantly learning.
Oh, there's nothing like seeing it, so I'm just going to pause my screen share and pull up a demo so you guys can see what some of that disclosure conversation from the Title IX module looks like. Can you see that, Ann? I haven't mistakenly. All right. So this is going to be the conversation from the first one. This is Jules, who will be coming to tell you that she feels uncomfortable around another student in the classroom. And what I love about this one, so this one specifically is not for somebody who has a responsibility to report, and yet we still cover what that looks like, even though the language is slightly different. So you'll get to see what that looks like. So as you can see, we give people some background on what they're going to be doing and what the techniques they'll be using. So we would have just taught these in the didactic.
So Jules, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Of course, always happy to chat. Anyway, in your email, you said,
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I wanted to see what was going on with making groups in the class for group assignments. Like, do you have to choose them or can we choose them? Because I get maybe you want to mix things up, but yeah.
So as you go through, there will be some areas where we're just giving you some directions. We want people to experiment, especially as Ann said. Try different things. This is your safe place to do that. So you get different options. People will pick something that feels right for what they would typically say.
tell me what's bothering you.
Well, there's this person who I guess makes me uncomfortable. And I'd rather not feel like that during class.
And this is the coaching feedback that I mentioned. So you might want to ask them if they're willing to share more. And as you can see, there's good choices, and we also model pitfalls so that we can provide feedback.
Who's making you uncomfortable? What are they doing?
It's not exactly something they're doing, it's more something they did. When this person and I were together, some stuff happened and it got pretty bad. And I can't be around them.
Thank you for sharing. I want to make sure you feel safe, safe and comfortable.
Thanks.
I do think it's important to model some of the.
Did you clearly tell this person no?
Uh,
I'm just trying to understand.
So I think it's important to model some of the pitfalls so you guys can see some of these nudging towards away from those types of questions.
So, in order to figure out how I can be most helpful, it's important for me to share some info with you. As an employee at this institution, I have a responsibility to keep students like you, more safe. That means when someone shares something with me that sounds concerning, I usually offer to share the information with people who can help so our students know their options and can get connected to support. If a student shares something about sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking, or sexual harassment, but there are other employees here, like at the Title IX office, whose job it is to know all the options available to the student. And even though I don't have to tell anyone else, I often feel like more help is better. The goal is I want to do whatever I can to connect the student I'm helping to resources, help them understand their options. Before I say anything else, I want to give you a chance to ask or share whatever you want.
yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. What would you say to other people at the school?
I feel like it'd help to give them your name so the Title IX office can contact you with resources. From there, you decide what to do. We can talk more about this later, but basically, you can choose to talk with a counselor or not. You can choose to make a report or not. You can choose to talk with an advocate or not. I'll check in with you. And you can ignore me. Like I said, you make the choices here.
Well, that concludes our session today. I want to thank everyone who took the time out to join us to learn a little bit more about these compliance products. I also want to extend a very big thank you to both Kim Wieland and Ann Todd for their expertise in walking us through how these products work and how critical it really is to implement them on a campus. If you want to learn a little bit more about the suite, we do have a dedicated page on our website. I also invite you to request a personalized product demo, and someone on our sales team will reach out to you to schedule that. You can do that on our website at kognito.com/contact. And if you're not following us on social, please feel free to like us and find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, where you'll hear all about new product updates, anything about any research initiatives we have going on, where you can find us if we're at conferences and events as well. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.